Afternoon. My name is Dave Heller, Heller & Heller Custom Furniture, Charlottesville, Virginia, and I'm a custom furniture maker. Right now, I'm working on a commission for making 6 Art Nouveau dining room chairs and a table eventually, once I finish the chairs. I'm making this leg. This is the leg, the front legs for the dining room chairs. And I've always really enjoyed the process of making cabriole legs, and it's kind of fun and a little bit magical if you haven't seen it before. So since I was making 12, I had plenty of samples, so I talked to Joshua about putting together this video on how I'm doing it. So that's what we're doing today. And if at the end of it you say, oh man, that was so much fun, I've just got to do that myself, talk to Joshua and maybe he can convince me to teach a class here on this. This is a one-day class, I would say. But anyways, so here we're going with a cabriole leg. So let's talk a little bit about this guy first. The design comes from China originally. They were the inventors of legs with these shapely knees. When they first came to Europe in the 1680s, they transformed European furniture, and the English and the French, funnily enough, went very different ways in terms of how they did it. The English added ball and claw and hairy paw and triffid, and they did some interesting things. The French went with a little bit more organic, and they had pad feet. And this is a later design. This is a 19th century French design. It's a slipper foot, so called because, you know, it's kind of looks a bit like a slipper. I think it's a very elegant shape, and I've made some of them over the years, and I wanted to explain to you what the key steps were in making this leg so that it's elegant and it does not take too long to make. Since I am doing this for a living, I want to get it done right, but I want to get it done. So that's what we're up to. So the most important part is, of course, the design. So when I'm designing a chair, I draw it full size so that I can measure the joinery and all that. But one of the other reasons I do that is so that I can make templates of the key parts. So, but before you design a cabriole leg, check your wood out. If your wood, so this piece of wood here, I've forgotten what the exact size. It's 2.5 inches thick. This was the thickness of the board. So making your cabriole leg 2 3/4 inches would be really unfortunate. Don't do that, okay? If you got 2.5 inch wood, make it 2.5 inches. Now you could make it 2 inches, but I consider that very wasteful. And the more thickness you have to work with, the more interest you can have in terms of the curvature. Because the cabriole leg is all about elegant curves, right? This is the key curve here, and it's the shape is mostly set by how aggressively you come off the shoulder and how far you set this back, so how big this shoulder is. This is quite restrained. This chair has an awful lot of things going on, so I did not need crazy wild legs on this. Okay, definitely the emphasis on this chair or on this leg is the ankle into the slipper foot. So that's what we're going to focus on when I go through making it. So there's my drawing. I had the drawing full size. I traced it. I took the piece of tracing paper. I stuck it to a piece of MDF. Then using a bandsaw, I cut around it, and then I used files and spoke shaves to shape these edges. And the reason I did that is I'm drawing a dozen legs, so I'm drawing 24 of those shapes. And so I'm going to follow that line 24 times on a bandsaw. I want it to be as smooth as possible so that I can follow the curves as smoothly as possible with my bandsaw. And that means I got the minimum amount of cleanup to do afterwards. Because there is a bunch of cleanup associated with doing it, but if your bandsaw work is choppy, you got a bunch more work. So I prefer not to if I can avoid it. So you get your template. This one has a little extension on the top because 2 of the 6 chairs are armchairs, and this is the arm part. So, but we're going to ignore that here because these are not the armchair legs. So I put my template on this surface, trace it, and I put it on this surface, and I trace it. So that the 2 straight lines, the back inside corner, is together, because that's the way it really is going to be. It is possible for you to draw them on the wrong faces, and you'll regret that, so don't. Okay? So trace it on your block. Cut your joinery before you cut any of your shapes, because it's so much easier to cut mortises and tenons in a square or rectangular block of wood than it would be any other way. So I forgot to mention something that was really obvious to you, but I couldn't see it because it's at the other end. The foot's turned. That is not necessary. I did this to speed things up. In the end, if we look at my foot, it is very rounded, but none of this surface gets used here. Like none of it's left. It just saved me a bunch of time rasping and carving on the end of the piece of wood. So I turned it on my lathe. There is a design called a pad foot, which is entirely turned. And that was why I chose to turn it this way, was that I learned how to make a pad foot cabriole leg a long time ago. It was convenient. And because I have so many of them, I saved a significant amount of time because I could turn all these feet in like an hour and a half, and it was taking an hour to carve the foot of each of them. And so it probably saved me half an hour on each one. So that's why it's turned. And just to complicate things, it's eccentrically turned because this is in the center of the foot, and then I put it in the center of the post. That makes the toe turn outwards a little bit more. But it does mean that you have this thing going on the lathe like this. So if you're not comfortable with eccentric turning, don't do it. Okay? This was a time saver. It's not a critical design element. So, and in fact, if I were teaching this class, we wouldn't turn those feet. We would make a slightly different shape, and we would not need that. So this block is ready to go to the bandsaw. So because watching someone cut something on a bandsaw is really boring, we're going to reach over here. Here's a block. I have cut, there's, as you can see, the cut lines there. So I'm going to use this little knife here, cut the tape. Come on. So I always cut this piece off first because I want to be able to get my bandsaw in on the shoulder there. There we go. Cut this one off. Cut the back side off. Okay, it looks pretty good from this side. Okay, so it's very important, do not throw those pieces of wood away. In fact, I am now going to organize this and put these back here because you need to, after you've cut it out, you tape it back together so that you can take this to the bandsaw. So let's imagine I had cut these. I tape it all back together so it's a block of wood again. I now turn my piece 90 degrees and I cut the other two faces. As long as I've used enough tape, everything holds together nicely. And sometimes, say for example, if you cut this line first, So you cut through all the pieces of tape, and so there's really not anything holding this on. After you've cut the back one on, tape it again. Okay? Tape is cheap. I use packing tape for this because it's clear, so I can see the lines through the tape. But you can use any tape you want. Okay? So where I was I had cut a profile, and then I stuck the pieces back on, and then I turned it 90 degrees, and I ran it through the bandsaw again along. And the way I'm following the way I like to cut these, I like to leave the line on the piece of wood, just so that I know that it's still that I know where I was, and I like to leave a hair. But I cut literally as close to that line as I can without cutting on the line. Because everything that I add past that is just more wood to be spoke shaved or rasped or whatevered away. So I don't want it. So I cut precisely to the line. And you know, if you cut a tiny bit inside the line, oh well, you know, we'll get over it. I did tape these together quite well. Because once you take the tape off, there's lots of pieces. Because each of these, which was one before, is now in three. So there we go. Somewhere in the middle of that is my cabriole leg. And I have all these really cool pieces that I wish I could think of a use for. But I haven't so far. But I do have lots of them if I ever think of a use for them. So we've cut our leg out of the block, and it's right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series. We've got about 4 distinct steps that we go through to turn this into this. So the way I think about this, I have 4 surfaces and 4 edges. And I need to clean up the 4 surfaces. And when I do it properly, the 4 edges are going to be perfect. Because the edges are what catch people's eye. So it's not in the end, what's really, what is dramatic and eye-catching and attractive about a cabriole leg is those edges. So that's what our objective is, but we do that by working on the surfaces, primarily. So here we have the cabriole leg that I just took out of the block. And I had literally not seen this before. So let me show you what I will look at. The most important thing is this seam here. I will sight down the seam because if it's perfect, if these 2 surfaces were perfect, then this seam would be perfectly straight. Of course, these are not perfect because they've got bandsaw marks all over them. But what I can do is I can sight down here, and for example, I can see that there's a bump here. So it bumps out to this side. So what that means is there's extra wood on this face that's causing this to bow out. So I'm going to remove that. So the first thing I'm going to do, and of course holding cabriole leg's a bit tricky. I like to clamp mine in my Bessie clamps here. I find them very helpful. And hopefully this workbench will hold the Bessie clamp. I have a different setup at home, and I have a pattern maker's vise. And it's a thing you can rotate all over the place. So I then put this bar in the pattern maker's vise, and I can rotate this from vertically to horizontally to whatever. The traditional way of holding a cabriole leg is like that. Okay, you stick it in the hole, and then you can put this in your leg vise and move it around a fair bit. That works pretty well. So if this doesn't work, we'll switch to that. So I'm going to start off with a spoke shave, and all I'm doing right now is I'm trying to clean up these ripples. Because I know they got to go anyways, so I may as well do it and see what the result looks like. Why are we doing this? The other thing that we've got to do is clean up this shoulder. The knee needs to roll over into the shoulder, and then the two faces need to be at exactly the same height. So, and this one's actually really good. This is quite close. They're often not, but so we gotta remove this. This is end grain on the top here. So, and we have controlled access, but a nice sharp chisel. So in some styles of furniture, this piece would be dead flat, and you would be important to keep it that way. In this particular piece, everything's going to kind of be rolling curved, so this is going to blend into the chair. That's the side rail, I guess. Yeah, that's the side rail and the front rail there. So none of this is going to be flat in the end, so I'm not worried about these top faces. Okay, I'm just going to, I'm pretty much going to ignore them. The other thing that you sense that is very important here is your sense of feel, because if it doesn't feel smooth, it isn't smooth. And I find that my sense of feel tells me more accurately. So the way I set my spoke shaves is the way Windsor chair makers do it. So I set the blade so it sticks out more at one edge than the other, so that I sort of got a more aggressive side and a less aggressive side. Evidently I have this set too aggressively right now. So I'll switch to a tool that always works, the Rasp. So rasps come round, half round, flat. And they come in many different grains, which is the technical word for the coarseness. This is a beast of a rasp. It's funnily enough called a chairmaker's rasp. This is a really coarse one. I use that when I need to take a lot of wood off in a hurry, and I have a handle on the other end so I can really push on it. This is my favorite rasp. It is a very fine, very elegant French tool. They're horribly expensive. Horribly expensive. Yuck. But they sure do cut. So And then there are Woodworking Files as well. And I'm experimenting with these guys. These are Japanese rasps. And they use a shear cut. So they don't have teeth the same way they have these arcing things. And I'm still getting used to this. This is a new tool for me. I think this is a little bit too coarse because it just bites in and it won't stop. So I've ordered some finer ones. I'll let you know how they go. So this looks terrible the way it tears up the wood, but that wood's got to go anyways, because what I hope you can see here is there's a bald spot here. So my rasp, when it cuts, it just jumps right over that, because that's an area where I either made a mistake on the bandsaw, or I came out of that was where I came out of the wood or came into the wood. Bandsaws aren't so good at that. So all that's got to be cleaned up. This is actually moderately okay. And when I look down the leg, it's high here, it's high here. And that's what I would be doing. I would be sighting along this line, and then I would be removing wood here and here. And in the end, I'd land up with something that looks remarkably like, say, this. So this is this leg, but cleaned up a bit more. So I've now got two surfaces, as you can, and this line is almost dead straight. That's pretty good. And it's good enough for my application. The more square your finished leg is going to be, the more precisely you have to get that line dead straight. So if you're making a cabriole leg with a ball and clawfoot and it's completely round, you don't have to fuss with this too much. But if you're making the late 18th century federal one with the carved knee that is almost completely rectangular, you got to get this bang on. So for what I need, this is good enough. So the most important part is the foot. So, and I start on the back and then I define the front afterwards so that I get this really nice shape. Okay? So this is a really important place. So that's what we're going to work on now. Well, if my clamp will let me, we will anyways. Okay. There we go. So one of the questions that somebody asked me recently was, how do you make 12 so that they're the same? And I said, well, they're not really the same in that I don't measure them and say, yep, this, it's exactly 12 millimeters here or 7/16 there. But I do make sure that they're balanced, and I make sure that they look the same. And one of the ways that I do that is I try and work symmetrically as much as possible. So I should have cleaned these two surfaces up, and I will eventually. But for what, let's assume that I had cleaned those two. This line was already pretty straight. So what I'm doing here is so these are, if you will, at 45 degrees, and I'm cutting a flat. And so I am going to cut this so that the shape of the flat from all the way from here, because I need to clean that up still, but let's assume I did. So that the shape of this flat all the way from here to here makes sense. That it doesn't have, a wide spot, then a narrow spot, then a wide spot. It has a long, narrow, gradually building up. So, and I don't round anything over, even though in the end, this is all going to get rounded over. Okay, so now I'm going to switch tools. So I would flatten this as much as I could without coming off the 90 degrees. Let's see what my next one looks like. Okay. Because I need this shape from all the way from the pad down there all the way to there to be an elegant, smooth curve. That's actually looking pretty good. So I got to take care of this little bump here. Let's say I worked on that a little bit more. So once I've got this bump down to 0, or essentially 0, I've still got this big flat surface here. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take off on 45 degrees this side, then 45 degrees on this side. So this is how I'm maintaining symmetry and consistency between the legs as I'm trying to work the same pattern in the same sequence every time. So that way, when you do the same things in the same order, about the same amount of time for each piece, they should kind of come out the same without you having to make any conscious efforts. Okay, so you see where I'm going to here. That where I'm going to land up. This is the same. This continued for a while. And the only other thing that I have done on this, that I haven't done here, is I file these off. So imagine I filed those off.
Hi, I'm Joshua Farnsworth. If you like this video, I've got a whole bunch of other free woodworking videos and articles at my website, which you can visit by clicking right here. You'll go to woodandshop.com. Down here, if you click, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. And over here are some really great other videos that I think you might like to check out.